20. They're going to have to catch his Stylish Jess. She's been facing the boys and back in against the girls. Terrific Energy is running a good one, but Stylish Jess, way too good tonight, wins it easily.
A finalist in last year's Champion of Champions, Stylish Jess BR also took the Grade 1 Mildred Vessels Memorial Handicap that season. But things haven't gone quite as smoothly for her this year.
We had to scratch her from the Millie Vessels because she colicked on race day and got pretty sick. She was pretty sick for about 2 or 3 weeks. We really had a hard time with her. But she's doing good now. I wish that wouldn't have happened. You know, typically she would be better than what she is probably, but she did lose a lot of weight. She went off her feed for a while. But she is coming around good.
With Stylish Jess unable to make the Mildred Vessels this season, Terrific Energy capitalized on the situation, turning in one of the best performances of her career.
Terrific Energy could not have been more impressive.
Another challenge would come from two-time stakes winner One Game Chick, who tuned up nicely for the Muriel Distaff with this effort.
It's all One Game Chick.
TVG is your home for all the Bank of America Challenge races, including the $125,000 Grade 1 Muriel Distaff. You can catch all the action from Los Alamitos right here on the Quarters, Saturday, October 31st.
Those challenge races represent the best in the world of quarter horse racing here at Oak Tree at Santa Anita, November 6th and November 7th. The best in the world when it comes to thoroughbred racing. We check now our Breeders' Cup Works 2009 calendar. And the calendar reveals today that we'll be talking about the Marathon, the Juvenile Fillies Turf, and the Turf Sprint. And when you take a look at Friday, you'll see 2 of these races, the Marathon and the Juvenile Fillies Turf and the Turf Sprint. One of the more anticipated races of either of the 2 days will be on Saturday. Let's talk about the Marathon, not necessarily looking at work, Simon, but talking about it as it relates to time form. This 1 3/4 challenge, usually the Europeans have an advantage, and we saw that last year.
This is going to be one of the shortest price favorites on Breeders' Cup weekend, and it's a horse called Mastery, trained by Said Bin Surur, who won the St. Leger Stakes at 1 3/4 last time out. And Mastery, when winning the St. Leger, that's the 3rd leg of the English Triple Crown, and you can see time form rated 131. That really towers over many of the American horses in here, and I think this horse is the horse to beat. Apparently, to the Godolphin camp, he has been working very well. At least we know he gets the distance.
And last year's winner of this race has just had a horrible year since then.
Yeah, it's been south since then. He hasn't been in the winner's circle. He's bounced around from Nat Al Sheba to Goodwood and Kempton. We're talking about Muhanak, of course, trained by Ralph Beckett. But Mastery and Muhanak, you can't talk about them in the same breath right now. I think another horse to pay attention to is the 4th place finisher out of the St. Leger, Father Time form rated 126 there.
The Marathon, 1 3/4 over the pro ride here on the main track at Santa Anita. On that same day will be the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Here's a look at the pre-entries.
You can see 12 pre-entered there, and an interesting European invader, Junior Tepsia, who's undefeated in 2 starts for Team Valor and Gary Barber. They're so good with their imports, of course. And, of course, Smart Seattle on the outside for Graham Motion, a filly who I've followed since her debut, been very partial to. She's done nothing wrong in 3 career starts with a win and 2 seconds.
Let's take a look this morning here at Oak Tree at Santa Anita. Elusive Galaxy as she prepared for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. 5 furlongs over the firm turf course here. Rafael Bejarano aboard.
This is a filly that you and I saw in person, Todd, up on Wood by Mile Day. And, you know, she went to the front in the Natalma, and I don't think that's how she wants to be ridden. She's a European filly. And I think what they're doing here, Tom, she's working with a filly called Rosa Grace. And she's 3 for 13. She's 2nd in a Grade 2. So she's a pretty good older filly. And what they're trying to do here is get Elusive Galaxy to rate. Coming off that effort in which she tried to go gate to wire last time out, they're trying to teach her to rate and finish up like she did in some of her European races.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, Simon, but when you're going to give a horse a target and you want to chase that target, I like to see him show some punch at the end of that work. You know, when Elusive Galaxy is asked at the end of this work, I don't really feel like she goes by her stablemate as I would like to see her do. You can see her covering her up there, but she's going to move outside along here and try to pass her stablemate. Look how much horse the inside horse has. Look at the rider's hands. Very still. Elusive Galaxy is being asked. You know, it's making the work look better than what it actually was.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Rosa Grace, a stakes winner there, placed over earnings of over $120,000. And those sheepskin pieces down the side of the bridle there, that's something that's very familiar with European runners. They're called cheek pieces, and they have the same effect as blinkers, and she has been wearing them in Europe and wearing them here stateside now.
Final time for the 5 furlongs, 101 and 4. Elusive Galaxy preparing for the Juvenile Fillies turf. That was a work. Now we're going to see a series of gallops here, starting with Smart Seattle out this morning here at Oak Tree.
She's been based here out in Southern California for a few days, and just seeing a routine gallop here. This is exactly what you want to see, a filly by Smart Strike. And I think she's moving well. She's shown us a bit of talent in her 3 career starts, and look forward to seeing a work from her maybe this week sometime.
House of Grace also out.
And, you know, the difference between House of Grace and Smart Seattle, 2 fillies that actually ran against each other. House of Grace got the best of her by a head in their last start. Is look at the difference in the hold the horses take. When you looked at House of Grace, kind of a relaxed hold, Smart Seattle, much more of a stronger hold. But as a House of Grace continues in her gallop, you'll see she gets stronger as she goes, takes a better hold of the bridle as time goes on. That's just a characteristic of the horses. I think both horses look good on the track.
Tappett's Fly has had a busy year.
Certainly has, making her 7th start in the Breeders' Cup, and we're back to a more aggressive type. This is good 3 fillies to compare to each other. Smart Seattle, slightly aggressive, a very lazy House of Grace. Now look at Tappett's Fly. The rider is really sitting up, pulling against this rider. He's got his hands in the neck strap. That's that leather strap that goes around the neck of the horse. And what that is intended to do is keep the rider's hands low. Once the rider's hands come high up above the horse's neck, then they start to toss their head. All sorts of things can go wrong. As when horses start throwing their heads around, they can hit themselves, they can cause themselves injury. Obviously, she's a very aggressive filly in the morning and in the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's no coincidence that she's a filly that likes to run on the front end. You can tell that by the way she gallops.
The Juvenile Fillies turf, one of the new races in at least the Breeders' Cup and the evolution of it. But, you know, a lot of people were wondering which would be the most popular. It turns out the turf sprint has definitely been the most popular when you look at the pre-entries this year.
22 pre-entries. This is one of the deepest fields, and it surprises me really with the downhill configuration here. So we've got a full field here. Of course, Lord Shannakill is a European horse that's now running in the barn of Richard Mandela. Lethal Heat cross-entered. We've talked about that in our news of the day. She's entered in the Ladies Classic and here in the turf sprint. She can only run in 1, by the way, because of Breeders' Cup rules. You can't run a horse that permits another horse from being excluded. That would happen here, I think, with 22 pre-entries.
Desert Code is back to defend his title, and what a shocking upset it was last year. 36-1, the off odds for Desert Code, and he won pretty handily that day. He is certainly not followed up with the type of year that would suggest he's going to be favored this year. I think it's safe to say he's going to be a price again, but why not look back to how he prepared last year versus this year?
I like this move right here, getting the chance to watch Desert Code last year and this year, because you know what? He comes to this race kind of the same way. Off a layoff, he had 1 prep leading into the Breeders' Cup last year, and it was not a great prep that made him big odds, and he came back to win. He's doing the same thing this year. This year, he's working in company as opposed to last year. I would like to see more from Desert Code finishing against a stablemate. You can see how quiet the hands are on the stablemate. He doesn't get by him. The work last year was by himself, but I think he's more enthusiastic in 2008 than he was in 2009.
I think so. He looks a little more enthusiastic without a stablemate in 2008. Iggy Puglisi up in 2008. Richard Migliore, of course, this year.
Final time, 6 furlongs, 1:15-1. Just 2 days ago for Desert Code over the Santa Anita turf course. Canadian Ballet, this is yesterday. On Thursday over the Santa Anita turf, 5 furlongs. And this is a quick drill with Alex Solis aboard.
Yeah, it's hard to time the work exactly because we're going down the hill. You very rarely see this out in Southern California. Horses permitted to work down the hill. You get a unique chance to watch your horse cross the dirt. That's why trainer Linda Rice is doing this. I've already talked about the weird configuration of the downhill turf course. And you want to pay attention to Canadian Ballet crossing the dirt here. Actually, just skips a little bit first time. But on the whole, I thought this horse handled that dirt very well. Sometimes when you see horses run down there in the afternoon for the first time, it can be a lot worse than that. I'd be very happy with this work, Tom. You know, and you got to remember, when she's in a field of maybe 10, 12 others, she's going to have a target to follow as well.
Well, Canadian Ballet comes from the East Coast. She's never been on a turf course like this one here at Santa Anita. What she did just now, crossing dirt, is what they're going to have to do in the turf sprint. So I think it's a great move by Linda Rice to come in here and get a run over the course that she's going to be competing on, because it is so different than anything she's done on the East Coast.
What about the fact that Canadian Ballet was actually entered in a stakes race at Keeneland but ends up here?
I think that could be a sign of confidence, but you never really know. Sometimes the owners want to make the trainer come here because it's the Breeders' Cup. But one thing you can take away, this horse handles the downhill turf course.
Distance might be a problem here. You know, going that 6.5 could be a problem.
5 furlongs, 57 seconds flat for Canadian Ballet, preparing for the turf sprint. Speaking of very fast, California Flag was a big reason why Desert Code won last year. Set those unbelievable fractions in the early stages of this race. How is California Flag? Is this horse as quick in the mornings as we see in the afternoons?
I think he is. I mean, he's a horse that, you know, Brian Coroner's had quite a while. I like the way this horse is coming into this race this year. He's working very well. He looks good. And last year, Tom, why he has that blip in the radar in this race last year is because he came out of there with some ankle problems. He's had ankle surgery since. You see the layoff from November to August. He's had a couple of races.